Welcome back to your favorite Broncos podcast. Let's talk Broncos. Bree Maestas, Joey Richards, Zach Seegers, and man, do you want to know the conversation we were having before we went live? Today's going to be a very special episode. Obviously, the Denver Broncos season is over and done with. So we're going to do 2023 Denver Broncos Awards. We've got all of them to break them down for you. MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year. You never know which direction we're going to go. Although I think we're all pretty unanimous in all of our choices here. But it'll be an interesting conversation. I know Zach is super excited about this one. He came raring and ready with all of his notes as he usually does. And Joey and me are just going to sit back and watch with some popcorn. Joey, did you make us popcorn first night?
I did not make us popcorn for tonight, unfortunately, Brie. Nope, did not happen.
Cool. What are you more afraid of, robots or aliens?
Well, that's a great point. It really feels like the alien rollout plan's coming out right now. They're getting us all used to the aliens, and then they're going to roll them out, and we're going to be normalized. But also on the same
pre-show conversation.
The AI.
It has to be live show conversation now.
The AI is all sweet and nice while we have the photo generators and all of that type of stuff. But the moment they start walking around, it's going to be a scary sight. We don't want to see that. I don't know. It's a close battle. That's like a Ravens Chiefs or a Ravens what's the other team? Ravens 49ers Super Bowl right there. That's what that one is.
I like the combination there. Zach, how about you? Aliens, robots?
I don't know. I feel like alien. Oh man.
I'm looking for advanced analytics on this one too. Give me some CPOs and.
Okay, I'll give you some advanced analytics. I'm going robots because our history, our planet's history of like people finding a new area that's currently inhabited by people, not good. Not good for the people that got discovered on a previously undiscovered place. Not good for them. Analytics says lots of negative EPA there. So I don't know. Maybe I go robots. Robots maybe have programming that we created that maybe has some safeguards. I don't know. I'd go that way.
Bree said kangaroos. For anybody that was
yeah, she's talking about how scary those kangaroos are. So.
Had to throw in the nonchalant one. You guys are all ready and raring to go. They're going to get banned from all the zoos in Colorado. But yeah, no, kangaroos. They're scarier than aliens and robots combined. What can I tell you? I am hand raising a pack of them, and I will release them upon my enemies. Let's really get to the bulk of our conversation here. We want to jump into awards, and I'm struggling with where to start here because I think that we have the same answer for offense. So let's go Offensive Player of the Year. Or do you want to do Rookie Player of the Year?
I'm fine with that. I was just okay. I felt like there were no clear answers, which was my surprise. Okay. I don't know if we'll all agree on this.
Well, that is shame on me for inferring anything from that. I just thought Courtland Sutton was the end-all be-all conversation there. Look at you both shaking your heads. I love it. I absolutely love that we disagree here because I assumed incorrectly. So let's go Courtland Sutton for me, only because his numbers were stacking up there with the elite wide receivers in the league. And I think we saw that he was the only leg the Denver Broncos offense really had to stand on that was consistent enough to rank up there for Offensive Player of the Year. I think I could have thrown out a certain offensive line member with a repeating number. I definitely wasn't going to throw out the quarterback, but I really like what Courtland Sutton was able to do with a minimal amount of attempts. So if he's not getting targeted as much to be able to throw up bigger numbers, imagine if he was with a quarterback that could really isolate his strengths and get him where he needs to go. The connection between him and Russell Wilson was great, but I'm thinking there could have been greater. I'm happy with Courtland Sutton and what he was able to do. Some of those passes that he reeled in during the season were highlight reels in themselves. You could watch those over and over again. His body control, his ability to win at the catch point was way up than it has been. We were seeing parts of 2019 Courtland Sutton plus some. So I think the idea that Courtland Sutton is not the Offensive Player of the Year, I want to hear the arguments for the others, but how do you feel about Courtland's production this season?
Yeah, if we were talking, honestly, the reason I don't have Courtland as my Offensive Player of the Year is I did what generally happens with the NFL, and I broke up my MVP and my Offensive Player of the Year. It's not unheard of that players won both of those awards, but that's what happened. I didn't want to double up on winners. And so, yeah, I have Courtland Sutton as my MVP. I ultimately agree with where you're going with this, that he was the best player on offense. I think there is an element, like I know I'm the numbers and data guy. I think there's an element that just feels right with Courtland Sutton as Offensive Player of the Year or MVP, because it was so impactful, everything he did. I think the idea of this offense without him is pretty scary. The running backs, I think, were kind of underwhelming, at least in the run game. And I don't think you feel really great about any of the other like receivers or tight ends being major factors in the passing game. So I think he was tremendously valuable there. That would be another case for him. I think his red zone stuff is another great case for him. He's tied for the most red zone touchdowns this season with 2 All-Pros in Sam Laporta and CeeDee Lamb. He's 5th in red zone yardage behind Lamb, Rashee Rice, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Michael Pittman. 5th among wide receivers with at least 10 targets in the red zone in terms of completion percentage. So it was a very reliable target down there as well. I think there's a lot of arguments for him. As I looked into it, and I still would pick him as my MVP, I'll go with a different Offensive Player of the Year. As I looked into it, the less and less good I felt about it. Here's what I'll lay out to the two of you. I put this in tweet form. Here's a combination or a comparison rather between Courtland Sutton and mystery receiver. I'm leaving both unlabeled to prove a point. Player X, right? 54 of 84 in terms of his targets. That's 64%. Player Y, 59 of 87, almost identical. That's 67%. Player X, 7% drop rate. Player Y, 10.6% drop rate. Goodness. Player X, 14 yards per reception. Player Y, 13.2. Player X, 1.65 yards per route run. Player Y, 1.66. Average depth of target, right? We think about Courtland Sutton being a downfield guy. X and Y are at 13.6 yards downfield and 13 yards downfield. Longest reception of the field. X is at 47. Y is at 46. You get the gist. That's Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. In terms of downfield usage, in terms of how frequently they're catching the ball, in terms of drops, Jerry Jeudy's superior. On a like per target basis, Jerry Jeudy was surprisingly a little superior, and it didn't feel that way. Again, going back to what I opened with, I don't know what this offense looks like without Courtland Sutton in it, because it seems like he was so dramatically more important than any other target in the passing game. I think it's the touchdowns that are inflating that for us, and I think it's the red zone production that's inflating that for us, because overall it's like yards per route run, which is my favorite receiver stat. If I had to like do one catch-all stat, he's identical to Jerry Jeudy right there. He's 0.01 yards better per route run.
It's very interesting. I mean, even there's like their box score stats. I was kind of shocked at how close it is. I think it's like 14 yards or something like that difference between Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. If someone could double check that for me.
Yes, I've got it handy actually. It's
Can you also grab me the targets?
777 yards to 758.
Yeah.
In terms of yardage, Sutton there has more. And then in terms of targets, Sutton caught 59 of his 87 targets. Jeudy caught 54 of his 84 targets. So
yeah,
not that different.
No, it was like very similar box score stats outside of the touchdown where Sutton was absolutely dominant
And red zone stuff,
this year. It was just I'm just talking about the box score stuff. Like the touchdowns were very crazy, but when you look at just like the yards and targets and all of that, it's very, very similar. And it shocked me as well because I mean, I was online being like, it feels like Jerry Jeudy's not part of the offense, and it felt like Courtland Sutton was the only part of the offense. Yet at the end of the day, when you actually sit down and check the stats, extremely similar. It is weird. I don't know really what that's all about. Because even Sean Payton and our impressors are talking about they're missing Judy on stuff. Like, for it to end out how it has, it's interesting. Now, another point here that I think is kind of interesting is Jerry Jeudy really didn't have any yards, a ton of yards in the first 3 quarters of the game. I was looking at just like these weird game splits the other day, and Jerry Jeudy was like top 10 in fourth quarter yards. He had a lot more than Courtland Sutton in the fourth quarter, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm talking top 10 just in the NFL. Jerry Jeudy was in fourth quarter receiving yards. So it's just interesting. I don't, and it didn't feel that way, to Zach's point. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it all.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bree.
No, Kat has got my tongue on this. I was interested to see targets there for them to be that close. I think the only thing you can draw a contribution to the feel, I guess, we're big on vibes here, is that it felt like it was in crucial moments. It was a lot of utilization. You're right. It was splashier with Courtland Sutton, especially in the red zone. So,
And it's weird, even when you look at stuff that kind of points more to a receiver's usage, again, like average depth of target, we will see gadget players very differently from like a vertical receiver there. They're nearly identical. In fact, Judy's average depth of target is deeper than Courtland Sutton's, which is bizarre to me. That really caught me off guard. One thing I would say, pointing to Sutton's favor, that maybe captures that feel that we're talking about. Russ's passer rating targeting Sutton is 20 points higher than it is relative to any other targeted player on the team. Like, the other people are maxing out in like the 105 range. And I think Sutton's at about 125 when targeted. So I think that captures, again, some of that feeling of how positive it was. If the only guy better, and I'm not really counting him because the sample size is a lot smaller, Brandon Johnson, like 140 passer rating when targeted. Put some respect on my guy's name. That's all.
How many targets for Brandon Johnson?
Not many. I don't know if I have it handy, but
no, that's fine. We'll go with less, but also cool stat. Thanks, Zach. Not a depressing stat of the day. All right. Well,
I have an offensive player of the year, guys. Are you guys ready for it right now?
Yes.
I think Courtland Sutton had a better case for me in the MVP one, because I'm just talking about value to my team. I think Sutton's up there. But if I'm talking about who is the best pound-for-pound player on offense, I'm going with Quinn Miners. I think he was the best offensive player this year for the Broncos. If I were to rank the wide receivers, and there's more wide receivers than guards, Sutton's probably in my top 30 kind of range. If I'm doing my top guards, I think Quinn Miners is closer to my top 7 type of guards. Like that's just kind of how I rank it. And I think Quinn Miners was pretty dominant this entire year. Best offensive lineman on a very improved offensive line group, going back to what we originally thought how he would develop after kind of a hiccup last year. So I think this is awesome. I'm excited for Quinn Miners' future. I think it's only up from here. And I have to give that award to him. He was the best pound for pound player on the offensive side of the ball this year in my eyes.
I almost want to throw him up in that MVP conversation because of that, Joey, because I think it goes so much under the radar. You attribute a lot of the rushing yards for the Denver Broncos to Quinn Miners and his ability to block there and to just throw the running back ahead of him on basically every down he has a touch on. So I don't know. I love that pick. Zach.
Yeah, my pick was also entirely different. I think Quinn Miners and Courtland Sutton are the other two picks. If I had to say, I think there's a very clear top 3, in my opinion. I went the other way. I went with Garrett Bowles. I will concede Joey's point. I think if we're saying pound for pound best player, I would hear the Quinn Miners end of that argument, maybe over Garrett Bowles. Maybe he's a more elite guard than what Garrett Bowles is at tackle. I think that's fair, but I think tackle is a much harder position to play than guard, and more demanding position and a more valuable position, which is why Bowles got the nod for me ultimately. I put this one out on Twitter, but the only left tackles responsible for a lower rate of their team's pressures than Garrett Bowles were Tristan Wirfs and Trent Williams. In case you don't know, those guys are pretty dang good at playing left tackle. Wirfs was new to it this year, but immediately looked like Tristan Wirfs. He's 7th highest grade. Again, I don't love PFF grades, but 7th highest graded overall in terms of pass blocking. 5th among starting offensive tackles. That's offensive tackles with at least 350 snaps. In terms of pass block win rate, he was an elite pass protector this year at left tackle, and I think that's one of the most valuable things you can be. So again, maybe it's a better case for him at MVP. I listened to my gut on it, and I put Courtland Sutton MVP, and I put Garrett Bowles Offensive Player of the Year.
Okay, interesting. All different picks there. I think that is definitely the top 3, though. I think that if you had to do it, it's the top 3. Now, Zach, I will say, I do have to point this out, and I'm not just trying to be combative. I would rank it, I think, because if I'm doing the value aspect of it, I mean, you said it. You mentioned the stats and stuff like that, but I don't know what the offense looks like without Courtland Sutton. Now, Garrett Bowles would be a really hard piece to replace. If I'm arguing this value aspect, which I didn't in mind, but if I'm valuing that between the two, it's hard for me to say Bowles ahead of him. I just don't even see the Broncos moving the football without Courtland Sutton this year.
I think that's a point. I like, my gut would kind of agree with you. I think, again, pointing to Jerry Jeudy's production, pointing to just how Courtland Sutton's production doesn't separate itself as much as we might think it would, I think puts a bit of a damper on that. And I would say, to counter it, this was one of the most sacked offenses in the league, one of the most pressured offenses in the league this year. And that's largely because of the quarterback. Imagine if that quarterback's blind side isn't getting bailed out by an elite pass protector, how much worse things could have been.
Well, we saw it the year before, right? I guess that would be kind of your argument. We saw it
pretty bad the year before.
Nathaniel Hackett. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah. it wasn't the same. But yeah, okay, interesting. I think that's an interesting conversation.
I like it. Can I throw out one silly little name? I was so close. Oh, sorry, Bree. You go with your thing, and then I'll throw out my silly thing.
I think I'm kind of delayed, so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Zach. I wanted to ask how much of that relies on Garrett Bowles having to hold off for longer than anticipated, making some of those struggles against the edge or some of those grittier defensive ends look worse than they probably were. I like the idea that the tackle is obviously facing a lot more out there, but your anchor point in the guard is also something that you want to highlight. The consistency has been there with Quinn Miners, but has Bowles been tasked with a higher ask, especially with who his quarterback is?
I think it's possible. I mean, you could hear it either way. I think, like, I would counter my own thing about tackle play by saying with a shorter quarterback like Russell Wilson, like a Drew Brees, like a Kyler Murray, it's been pretty demonstrated that the interior offensive line has added value. You need those guys to kind of feel comfortable up front. That's especially important, again, for a guy like Russell Wilson that well, actually, I don't know, because you could argue that either way. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be down for either case. I think Quinn Miners is a more elite player. I think Garrett Bowles was also elite, though. And I generally think tackle's a harder, more valuable position. And I think that's reflected in NFL contract values.
Yep. Thank you for clearing that up. Please throw your fun one out there.
All right. This one's silly, and it's why I didn't ultimately go for it. But when I was looking up Courtland Sutton's stats, it was like, man, this guy's got a really strong case for Offensive Player of the Year. I know Joey's going to love it.
I know
it's not the direction you guys think I'm going. Samaje Perine. Samaje Perine was fucking insane this year.
I know.
And it's not just like for the Broncos, was he? Generally speaking, measuring him against like the Christian McCaffreys of the world in terms of receiving from the running back position, he hangs with them. It's now, and I'm going to own this right off the bat. A lot of it is situation based. He's getting these receptions in like 2-minute drives when the defense is playing off and kind of leaving him wide open. And he was good at catching them and running. But that was also happening for the the Broncos' other running backs, and they were nowhere near as productive. They were about half as productive as Samaje Perine. So it's not all situation. That said, here's my goofy stats. Okay. 50 of 53. So that was his targets. 50 completions on 53 targets, 94.3% completion percentage. No one in the NFL targeted 20 times, at least 20 times, has a better completion percentage when targeted. Like I said, about twice as productive as the other backs on the roster. He's at 9 yards per reception. Javonte and Jaleel are at 5.2 and 4.9. He's getting to that 9.1 number, which is second in the league, despite a negative 0.3 ADOT. James Cook, the only guy ahead of him, has an ADOT 2 yards higher, and he's like, I think, half a yard better in terms of yards per reception. So that's kind of crazy. That, again, number 2 in the league in terms of yards per reception from the running back position. That's Gibbs. That's Christian McCaffrey. That's Alvin Kamara. Stupid stuff. Yards per route run. I highlighted it with Sutton. I talked about how it's, one of my favorite receiving metrics. He ranks 18th, which is really, really good. Here's the players that are better than him: Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk, Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, AJ Brown, Rashee Rice, Keenan Allen, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Tank Dell, George Kittle, and Amari Cooper. And that's it. That's the whole list. He's better than Jamar Chase, who's at 2.02. He's better than Stephon Diggs at 1.98. He's better than Devontae Adams at 1.97. It's crazy. Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, and Rachaad White are the only running backs with more receiving first downs. He was an elite receiving running back. And talking about where is this team without Sutton? Where's this team without Bowles? Where's this team without Samaje Perine getting 400 yards of clutch yardage to help create some of these fourth quarter comebacks that Russell Wilson's getting credited with?
Zach, where along the heat map of Russell Wilson's targets was Samaje Perine getting the most of his catches?
That's a great point.
Those little checkdowns. And I know it's goofy little situation. And this is why I've been saying the numbers are goofy. It's a situation.
I was curious.
Part of it.
It's a great point.
It's crazy. It's again, I don't have the numbers right in front of me. It's something like 90-ish% of his target share is like right there in front of the line or right behind the line of scrimmage. Yeah. It's in total check down range, which I think you could argue it makes it less impressive because it's happening in these 2-minute drill situations and people aren't really respecting that part of the field. I think you could also argue it's more impressive because he's hanging with James Cooks, with Christian McCaffrey's, with Jahmyr Gibbs's, with Bijan Robinson's. All those players have schemed up, designed plays for them in the passing game to maximize their usage in the passing game, to maximize their yardage output, to maximize their efficiency in that role. That's not the case for Samaje Perine. It is checkdowns, and he is matching those guys' designer efficiency.
Okay, I have to push back here a little bit. I love it because it's fun, but I do have to say I think this is where I can't give him consideration for MVP. In a good offense,
offensive player of the year.
Or offensive player of the year. In a good offense, he can't have that many yards. Whereas with Christian McCaffrey, these other guys, the way they're utilized, it makes sense for them to have that many yards. Samaje Perine's doing it, and Zach, you kind of mentioned it, because I looked at this too. I think, how many yards did he have, Zach?
Something like 400.
Okay. It was like, I think it was 450 or something like that. And 350 of
455.
455. So 355 of them came in the second quarter and the fourth quarter. What does that mean, guys? That means at the end of games, just like I know everyone had eyes, they saw it at the end of halves. Samaje Perine is in there because he's a great blocker and he's a good check down guy. And that's when the defense, of course, isn't going to cover you directly in front of the center in the middle of the field. And that's exactly where the Broncos kept going with it because their offense doesn't work really well. And Samaje Perine will carry us down the field up until a trick shot right at the end to hopefully get a touchdown. That's kind of how that worked. It reminded me of how Deebo was getting it done in the fourth quarter. It really was. It was very similar to that style of play. I'm going to check it down to the running back right in front. He's going to take us all the way there. Trick shot at the end. I got it. It's on me. And Samaje Perine benefited off of that so greatly. So
He did.
With the Broncos offense getting better after this year, hopefully, I don't think Samaje Perine, a good Broncos year, Samaje Perine has a worse year in the stat totals. That's all.
Yes, I agree. But I would say we're not debating Samaje Perine on a good offense. We're debating Samaje Perine on this Broncos offense, and he was dang good on this Broncos offense. That's all I'll say.
All right, cool. I get it. I love it. Samaje is really fantastic in that role as well. He's probably, if you were to just look for a guy that could catch checkdowns and block, Samaje's probably the best in the league at that. He's an extra offensive lineman in the he's like an extra offensive lineman blocking. He really is. And then he's a good catcher of the football. Like if you have to dump it off to somebody, Samaje's going to catch it. So yeah,
that probably came in handy too, being down tight ends, Joey. Just a bona fide positive variable there for the Broncos. It worked. Well, it sort of worked. I don't know. Let's change course. Let's go to flip it to the other side of the ball and do Defensive Player of the Year. We spent 26 minutes on offensive. I'm just gonna let you guys know that I'm not going to be here for an hour and a half. So when the timer strikes for me, I'm just gonna leave. I'm kidding. Defensive Player of the Year. I'm gonna go with my feelings on this one. And I'm not gonna go with who is an expected choice. I'm gonna go friend of the program, PJ Locke, because he had to step in circumstances that maybe didn't have him slotted as the number one guy to start. But Kareem Jackson being a tumultuous time for his final season in Denver, Caden Stearns getting injured in training camp, PJ had to field and not cut his teeth necessarily, but he was dealing with his own issues during training camp and injuries, and was able to come back and start and just kind of solidify his role in the secondary there with Christian Parker and Vance Joseph. You could tell that the coaches really liked him. That's why he had the opportunity to do so. I was just really impressed with his ability to continuously step in and have the defense function at a much greater clip than it would without him. I know that I had fought the notion for a long time. We had said Caden Stearns should be the starter there. And then obviously with that injury, we're hoping he has a speedy recovery. PJ Locke was able to do just that, to come in and make the defense better by just being a part of that backfield, that secondary. So really excited to see what he was able to do. In my eyes, that alone really puts him up there for me. And we know the greats, we know the Simmons, we know the Surtain, but I think that it can't be gone without noting what PJ Locke did for this team and everything that he's had to do to get to this point, being undrafted and having the adversity that he's had to get to the league and just get to the point that he's been in. So I'm really proud of him, really excited for what he's going to do. And that's why he's my Defensive Player of the Year.
Love it.
Yeah. I've got him for a different award. But that means I've got some stats ready.
Wait, save your stats, Zach, for when you have them for your award.
Then I can just mention him when the time comes.
Okay.
I'm thinking the back end should go faster because, again, we've already talked about some of our MVP picks and whatever. But to back it, because this is a nicer award for PJ than what I was going to give him, so I'll throw it out here to bolster Bree's case. For one, he's gotten more snaps this year than he had in his whole career combined prior to this point. 4 years in the league, it's gone from 6 snaps on defense. I'm not counting special teams here. 6 snaps to 27 to 111 to 539. Love seeing that for him. He was sent on a blitz just 9 times this year, 3 sacks. That's crazy. That's a crazy rate. Talking about that impact, not only do you have that stat, 2 forced fumbles and an interception from PJ. You talk about the turnaround for this defense and it being fueled in large part by takeaways. PJ was a big part of that. 5 passes deflected as well. Again, that's just more defensive splash plays. That's where he really thrived in my opinion, this season. That's good for forcing an incompletion on 16% of his targets. What does that mean? Justin Simmons is at 17%. So pretty dang good from PJ there. Good splash plays. Happy he had such a great year.
Hey, I love it. I love it. Like you, Zach, I have him for a different award, or he's in the running for. We'll see if he wins it. I still haven't decided. I have a three-man race going on in my head right now for the, I think the award that you're going for there. But my defensive player of the year, I'm going Zach Allen. Very critical at him at the beginning of the year. Extremely critical. I think he was like the only disruptor on this football team. If I'm being honest with you, there was nobody that disrupted the play on both pass and run as much as Zach Allen did, which makes him defensive player of the year in my eyes. No one did it the way he did it. I mean, I had higher hopes for DJ Jones. I thought that he could help fill that role. He didn't do it like Zach Allen did. Any edge rusher didn't do it like Zach Allen did. It's just plain and simple. I don't think anyone affected the defense on a play-to-play basis as much as Zach Allen. And there might be another defensive player maybe for MVP. So that's kind of why I would leave a certain guy out of there. But I'm going Zach Allen for DPOY.
Yeah, I think I know where you're maybe going with the other player. I think Zach Allen's a good pick. I totally overlooked it just with how generally disappointed I was with the front seven this year. I was like, okay, I can cross that off. But yeah, I think Zach Allen has a really good case. He impacted the game regularly. And like you just said, I think he was maybe the only member of the front seven to do so on a regular basis this season. So I think that's a great pick. Even though I went in a different direction.
Where did you go, Zach?
What direction did you go in?
I went the Patrick Surtain direction. It's basic. The advanced numbers aren't really there. The basic numbers aren't really there. I think he's just a great cornerback. I'm banking on the eye test. I'm banking on his performance against the elite receivers this year. Despite being in a pretty flawed, questionable defense, a defense with so few people making an impact up front. I just think he's one of the best cornerbacks in the league. And that's also supported by, I think if you look at a lot of the smartest minds nationally covering this sport, as they put out their all-pro brackets, whether or not they had whether or not they had votes. I'm thinking like Nate Tice, Benjamin Solak, off the top of my head, both had Patrick Surtain as first team.
Or you're not even mentioning the NFLPA one, which the NFL players voted on, and Patrick Surtain was first team. So
great point too.
That would kind of lead to that as well.
And he was the team's MVP winner. Honestly, Pat Surtain is the MVP in my heart. He's the MVP overall for me.
The team's MVP winner, and again, they had 3 Pro Bowlers. Justin Simmons was an All-Pro, and then, Marvin Mims is a special teams All-Pro. But Justin Simmons in that defensive backfield was an All-Pro, and they gave the team MVP award to Patrick Surtain. He's my defensive player of the year. I've got another offensive player we've already discussed for MVP, so that's why I went there.
Elite receivers like Keenan Allen.
Zach's going to line for MVP. In case anyone's wondering, I'll just throw it out there. Zach, give it up. It's
we saw his voting sheet. Sorry to ruin the surprise for everyone. It's number 25.
Boom.
No. All right. Well, you guys have been teasing it. Well, let's do Rookie of the Year first. I'm going Marvin Mims. That one's a straight shooter. Like the best numbers that you're getting put out there. It's gotta be Mims. I saw a little bit of a hesitation there, Zach, with your head nod. Tell me why. I'm a little scared.
Give me
your stats. Give me your page of stats you wrote up on Mims.
I so hard.
I almost went with Mims.
I'll kick him out of the fucking show.
I will say, I think
who did you go with?
How shallow this whole situation is says a lot about their draft most recently. It's like, is it going to be the returner or the undrafted running back? I really think those are the only 2 choices. I went with the undrafted running back. Wasn't the biggest part of the offense. I get that. Neither was Mims. When we did our midseason thing, I was going to talk about usage as an argument in Mims's case. And then as I looked it up, I realized, oh, shoot, Jaleel McLaughlin's being used more than Mims. I have some stats to back him up here in a second, but I think Mims is a very valid pick. Again, he's an all-pro. Yes, as a returner, but he was one of the best returners in the league, and added value there. And again, who else are you going with in this draft class? Are you going with Drew Sanders? I don't think so. Are you going with Riley Moss? Nope. Yeah, are you going with Alex Forsyth? Like, where are you going? Like, okay. Also, by the way, second straight draft with like out any real contributors. JL Skinner. Where are you, buddy? So I don't know. I think it's Jaleel McLaughlin or Mims. I think both are good picks.
I forgot about that Jaleel McLaughlin counts because he's undrafted. So I went Marvin Mims, but I think I probably would go with Jaleel if that were the case. I was talking to Frankie about this yesterday. This has nothing to do with the show, with what we're talking about, really. But I'm more hopeful for Marvin Mims than I think other people are. I think that there's that if I'm just talking about, I'm not going off the stats and all of this from what I saw this year, but if I know one thing, it's that Marvin Mims can win deep, and that generally helps wide receivers with their route running later down the line. Like that generally makes it easier for them to get open. Like it really does. Like DK Metcalf has made a career off running the 9. Everyone's afraid of him running the fly down the field, so it's opened up everything else in his game. And Marvin Mims has kind of shown that he can be really, really good in that one elite territory. Like that's where he's amazing. So I'm excited to see him develop. I don't think it takes a ton for him to become serviceable in these other areas because he does have that one strength to his game. So I just want to throw that out there. It makes it easier. It's not like one of these guys that you really never see develop turn into a route runner, like George Pickens, for example. No one's afraid of him running anything. That's the issue. Marvin Mims has that deep ball, which opens up things. It should help him open up other things, and he can be kind of a deficient route runner and still get away with it later in his career. So I think I'm kind of hopeful for Marvin Mims still.
Yeah, I think the other point kind of supported it. It was something you brought up. I think the last time we hung out, maybe it was like pre-show or post-show on here, but I think it was the last time we hung out. And I was talking about you brought up this kind of point about how you were talking with Frankie and you feel a little bit better about Mims. And I'm like, I don't know. That usage stuff still really concerns me about how he's only being used on go routes right now.
Oh, yeah.
And you pointed out something that I thought was, to me, a bit of a light bulb moment where you were like, well, where's Russell Wilson throwing the ball? He's throwing the ball downfield. He's throwing the ball to the boundary. So are we surprised that Mims's usage is heavily, especially when it's something he's so proficient at, downfield and to the boundary? No, that's actually pretty sensible. I do think the rate, again, 50% go routes, like I do think there are concerns maybe with him needing to develop that, but Joey's point I think is valid all around. And I'm feeling more optimistic about Mims now than I was a week ago, just kind of recontextualizing that stuff.
I mean, I want to see what it looks like with a different quarterback. But on that point, Grandizer 12 is asking for Broncos comeback player of the year. That may tie into anyone's most improved player. I don't have one prepared. That's a good question.
I'd go Russ. Honestly, like I think we can be very critical. He was a bottom 5 quarterback last year. I still don't think he's the answer, but he was like any measure one of the worst quarterbacks last year. And yes, Hackett was a big part of that. Russell Wilson was a big part of that. He helped design that offense. He showed up out of shape. He also dealt with injury. That's not on him, but like that's part of the reason his play was bad and a factor in comeback player of the year stuff. He came back healthy. He came back more in shape. He came back in a better offense, and I think he was more committed to like working on his flaws. I think Nate Hackett Russ was still in like let Russ cook mode. Like, oh, I'm going to show the Seahawks that you just need to put the offense in my hands, and I'm going to carry it. And then I think this year's Russ was a little more humble and a little more understanding of like, okay, I've got a niche I have to perform within here. And I think he was better as a result. He would be my pick.
Okay, I think that's fair. Are we tying this in with most improved? I think that's
no.
No, I was just answering the comment.
Okay, well then I would agree. Comeback player of the year, Russ. Hey, Shoot, he gets one.
Okay. Most improved
I'd
player,
also-
Joey.
Or Sutton.
Most improved player, I'm going with Jaquan McMillan, otherwise known as Jaquan McMillian. That is my most improved player this year. I'm kind of looking at a Pro Football Reference right now, and he played in one game last year in which he was targeted 12 times, gave up 6 completions for 94 yards. I don't think anyone expected him to come in this year, take over that nickel spot, and just not let it go at all. There was never a moment where Jaquan McMillan shouldn't have been the starting nickel cornerback for the Broncos. I have to give it to him. It simultaneously, as the defense kind of figured it all out, McMillan started playing. I think that's notable, right? That's something that needs to be said. And he was just a super valuable part of this defense this year, and I expect him to carry this over the next season. The Broncos have their starting nickel of the future, and it's just crazy it came from Jaquan McMillian. I don't think anyone expected it. So shout out to him all day. That is my most improved player.
Yeah, the Broncos didn't even fully expect it. If you remember back in training camp, he was being used as an outside corner. So I mean, again, maybe a little criticism of the staff there, but it worked out pretty well for the Broncos in the long run. They found their guy. I went with PJ Locke. I highlighted my stats on him already. I think he was awesome this year, going from a backup level contributor to a guy who I think we all feel good about starting next year. While I was picking that one, I kind of overlooked Jaquan McMillan because he's got a very similar case, and I think you could argue maybe even a better one just because he was, if we're going most improved, I think he's improving from a lower point than PJ was. I think we could have, I know we did on our off-season shows, and it's not just because we had the guy on our show. You could look at columnists all around Denver having some faith in PJ Locke as maybe the third best safety on this team, as a real up-and-comer. That was not really said about Jaquan McMillan outside of like, oh, there's some buzz that the Broncos in-house like McMillan. And he went from that, like a true no-name, which I don't think PJ Locke was last offseason, to, man, it's hard to imagine him being a non-starter next year. It feels like he's a lock for that starting spot.
1,000%. 1,000%. I mean, I think this is a 3-man race here, and I kind of picked McMillan. I'm hoping Bree picks the other one here because I think it's the most obvious answer, and I think it's maybe the most well-deserving answer as well. So I wonder if Bree has that one.
I was going to choose Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yes.
One, because I now have a very soft spot for the trenches, but the improvement from his rookie season, I mean, this guy was being called an abject failure coming into the league, and in Broncos country, he's been getting a lot of flack for, I think, what was a weak offensive line, a weak unit in general, and kind of taking the flack for a lot of it. Now his consistency is way up. He was getting blamed last year for being a little too tall. I mean, just seeing where he's come from to where he is now to being one of the higher graded centers in the league in a very non-forgiving role. You don't get a lot of kudos. You don't get a lot of flowers. But then when things are bad, everyone's quick to point right at the middle of the field. So really excited to see what Lloyd Cushenberry has done. Will it be enough going forward? I don't know. What my question mark here is, how the lines continue to. Yes.
Sorry, you cut out real quick. Can you?
Oh, yeah. As I was getting into the meat of my conversation. Going forward, though, is it going to be enough for what they want to do? Are they going to be able to retain him, considering the position that they've been put in along the line? They're not going to be able to afford this now reborn center who's so important to this offensive line that it's kind of sad. Like, he performed so well that he's unable to kind of keep this role and keep this line safe and sturdy. The unit itself needs the entirety of everyone on the same page, and Cush is the literal anchor point for that to work really well. So it's a sad one to put out there, but absolutely the most improved.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I don't think there's any way you can't say it. Like only reason he might not be a Bronco next year is because maybe he outpriced himself, which kind of just tells you what the season he had. He's going to be really good, especially if he goes down to more of a zone block system, I think, than the Broncos are currently running. If he goes down to one of those type of teams, he's going to be absolutely dominant and super valuable. So, yeah, I think that's a great choice. And like you said, it's just he didn't. I mean, before the season, I think it was more likely. I thought that he would not get another contract because the Broncos wanted to move on at center, not because he outpriced himself. So, yeah, that's a good pick there.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance he ends up demanding over $10 million annually this year. Just looking at the market out there.
It's good centers, though.
I mean, that's one thing is like it's a fairly good center market. Yeah, maybe it doesn't go too high, but looking at the guys who recently, like Corey Linsley, recently hit the open market, signed for 12.5. I don't think he's quite there, but like an old man, Mitch Morse, I think he could probably, demand a little more than in that range. I think he'll be in that like 9-10 range, and good on him. 3-4 years. It's going to be generational, life-changing money that he earned this year. If he was like released by the Broncos before the start of the season, I don't think he gets signed to be a starter elsewhere. And now he is definitely, again, maybe it's in Denver, maybe it's not. He's definitely a highly paid week 1 starter next year. And I mean, talk about improvement. That's proof in the pudding right there.
Gary Fire said we need the Kush push. That's awesome. Although it's like really, right? That's really awesome. I don't love what it did to Jason Kelsey's body and tore him apart, but I like it. I like the little rhyme there. Grandizer is trying to stretch out this episode to 2 hours and said, "Oh, we can't forget the special team player of the year." Is he trying to get this vote in over here for Drew Sanders? I mean, is he really pushing for it?
I think Mims is your answer for special teams player of the year.
Yeah, who's one of the 3 special teams all pros and one of the like 6 special teams pro bowlers? Marvin Mims. That's the pick.
I like it.
I do. And all jokes out there, all jokes aside, Grandizer, you send as many questions as you want. Joey, I see your hand. I heard you talking, and I'm not trying to talk over you.
Quick shout out to Tremont Smith as well while we're talking special teams. He was fantastic.
Thank you.
Breeze guy.
Thank you. He was my guy. I was literally the only person tweeting about him until all went to hell. And I was like, okay, listen, though, what I saw was special. There's just a reason, okay? Like, there's a reason. We're going to be fine. What?
It's very interesting. You guys just are going to sit here on this podcast and not give Will Lutz his props. Or is that what we're doing here on the podcast now?
I'm okay.
Oh, we should have a quick Will Lutz update because Perna has a bold prediction on him.
I just remember. I don't know.
Perna just missed.
Oh no!
Wow, Perna said he would make 90% of his field goals. He got 88.2. He was 30 of 34. I think 31 of 34 would have done it. Yes, he is one miss. He is one miss away from hitting that bold prediction.
I can see the miss now. I can hear
it. That is an atrocious beat for Perna. And he missed one within 39 yards. So if he was just...
There's this first kick. You remember that? Everyone on this stick.
I did. Don't say you didn't. Don't sit here and lie to people and say you didn't want blood.
I was the Will Lutz defender. Let's get it on.
He needed him to come through.
I was on here calling Maher Ben Simmons every single episode until they got him. I don't know if people forget that. But all right, let's move on.
Zach's looking up Maher's stats because that's what we do here. MVP
perfect A.
Man,
who's perfect in the playoffs? Brett Maher.
The playoffs, the one game where they, wow, woo!
Every kick was a sweater, it was a nail biter, but it snuck in the uprights. It got in there.
My MVP, guys.
MVP.
Zach, I'm kind of excited because you said this player, you couldn't find any real stats on him. So I'm about to give you a Zach Seegers a stat. I'm going Patrick Surtain with the MVP. Zach, did you know Patrick Surtain in man coverage is the nearest defender? Robbie just sent this to me not that long ago. That's why I have this, by the way. Shout out to Robbie.
Robbie NFL is a cheat sheet.
Completion percentage allowed, 39.1, which ranked him second among corners in the NFL. Passer rating allowed, 32.2, first in the NFL. Yards per target allowed, 3.7, first in the NFL. Yards per snap allowed, 0.8, also first in the NFL. This is among 49 cornerbacks with 20 plus targets in man coverage. Surtain was still amazing, and it's really cool that he was able to do that with a front seven that generated no pressure unless they were blitzing. So I think it was a tremendous season because as a corner, you are so dependent on those guys in front of you to get home and pressure the quarterback and make sure that quarterback can't hold on to the ball forever. The Broncos weren't able to do that unless they took guys out of pass coverage, also making it harder for Patrick Surtain. So it just wasn't his easiest test of a season, yet he still was really, really good. He's the MVP, by far the best player on this football team, in my opinion. I don't think there's really anybody close. And I can't imagine this team with him off of it. I think they would have been an absolute train wreck on defense. So
that's important, Joey. That statement right there is super important, that without Patrick Surtain on this team, the Denver Broncos don't elicit the same reaction from me. So I don't want to conflate the rest of it. I don't want to get into the rest of it, but that point in itself is why. Zach.
Yeah, I think the reaction they'd elicit is the same reaction as when you heard touchdown Dolphins for the 10th time that day. I mean, it's, oh man, I almost made your spit or drink out. It's
hates like
that's hate. I don't think that's hate. What, you take Pat Surtain off this defense? I think it gets a lot worse. You have Fabian Moreau.
They scored 95 points.
Yeah, Fabian Moreau and Damari Mathis are your starting corners on the perimeter. Okay, good luck with that. Enjoy. I think you are going to get shredded by every single team with a halfway competent passing attack. Yeah, Patrick Surtain was incredibly valuable. Just going back to what we said about Sutton or Bowles or whoever, what is this team without him? Man, you take Patrick Surtain off the field, and this defense, I think it remains historically bad all season long, is where I was getting at. I don't think there's any turnaround to be had. If you're gonna have Surtain. I pick him as my defensive player of the year. I'm still going Bowles MVP, Sutton offensive player of the year.
Wow. Okay, Bowles MVP, man.
You still have this is Zach. This is why you still have people in Broncos country who are like, well, you know, the Broncos hadn't taken a cornerback at 9, and this is why we're still in this predicament, because you wouldn't go a 3 across the board. I listen. Bowles is fine. It's Pat Surtain.
Yeah, I'll be outvoted. I'm okay being outvoted. I'm
just kidding. I'm just messing with
you. Get a graphic made for this event, guys. I think that we will, in the DMs, come across with a consensus, and that's what we will go with. The consensus is also my picks. I just decided.
But also, we don't need a tie break. It's 2-1. I think MVP goes what? Surtain, offensive player of the year.
Patrick Surtain and a tiny Bowles.
No, I didn't pick Sutton.
But it's 2-1, Joey. Too bad. It's Sutton, offensive player of the year. Defensive player of the year.
Miners next to a big Sutton.
Is what? Zach Allen, or who's Bree's choice? PJ Locke. I'll go Zach Allen there as the tiebreaker because my pick's already MVP. What, most improved player? We've got another split there.
Let's go Lloyd.
Go Lloyd. I'm cool with going Lloyd.
Yeah, Lloyd's a good one. All right. Well,
I guess
I'd personally say let's go with the friend of the show, but
friend of the program. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I'm kidding.
Alex does YouTube is voting for Vance. Not sure where. Just is. Like to the chat.
Well, he is high in making techno music, according to his other comment. So
That's why we appreciate Alex, is he made
Probably not-
time in between that very busy Friday to come into the chat just to vote for Vance. I love it.
Ooh, I most improved could go to Vance. But anyways, okay.
Okay,
That's all I have.
we're gonna get out of
going
here,
off
right?
The rails. Off the rails.
Off the rails. We'll be back on Monday. We got a lot of stuff that's really cool that's happening. I want y'all to keep it posted. So if you're watching and you're not subscribed, do it now. Oh God, Zach's got another thing. You got more stats
I do.
on the big things?
There's amazingly cool things on the way. I've got a lot of good content that I haven't been able to put out in a long time, and it's coming, folks. You better strap it. It's gonna be awesome. That's one thing. Thing number two, there's all these media podcast competitions, whatever right now. Vote for LTB as a winner if you enjoy our show. The link is in the description below. Look down there in the description. You'll see something that says vote for LTB, and there will be a link right next to it. Click on that link. It's going to take you to a Twitter poll. Click on Let's Talk Broncos if you enjoy the show. That's all I'll ask of you guys. It's very nice and would make me happy.
It's not a trap. It's not a trap. I'm laughing because that's hilarious. It's not a trap. Click on the link. Go vote for us. We appreciate you guys.
You'll see it's a Twitter link. There's nothing weird about it. It's not like I won't say one of the other links, but there's nothing shady about that link.
No, I know. It just it looked a little bit nefarious as I'm laughing. It's like, I hope they click it and vote it. No, we really appreciate you guys. Alex is going to make a Twitter specifically just to vote for us. So thank you, Alex. You're the man. Samuel Castro, good to see you. Grandizer, hello. Kyle Blacker was in here earlier. We're going to get on out of here, and we'll talk to you all next week. Okay, bye. Go Broncos, I think.